the European Polio Union actually covers all the, or has the possibility of covering all the countries which are within the area of the Council of Europe. Now, the Council of Europe is not the 27 members of the European Union. It comprises 42 member countries, which range from Moldova in the east, on the border of Ukraine, well in the news at the moment, right the way over to Portugal in the west. And it also includes certain Mediterranean countries, for example, Cyprus, or the Turkish part of Cyprus, the Greek part of Cyprus, and Malta. So it goes right the way across. And inside of that 42 country area, there is approximately 2 million polio survivors. Inside of the EPU, there's about 960,000. And the EPU actually comprises of 19 countries, about 21 organizations, if you take in the loose ones which are associated with it and affiliated to it. The situation in Europe with polio survivors is that there is quite a wide age spread. You will find that the younger members are in the east of the area. So if we go over to Slovenia, the Czech Republic and such like, their ages do range from 55 upwards. Whereas if you go into the more traditional areas, for example, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, they are they're in the high 70s, 75 years plus. I'm just about to hit the bottom end of that bracket. The overall situation is that in the older countries, there are established facilities in the way of support groups. For example, there is Polio Ireland, paid staff, British Polio Fellowship, paid staff. There is the Danish organization, don't ask me to pronounce it, it's very difficult, paid staff, and a hospital. And there is also the Finnish organization, paid staff. Those are the only organizations inside of the EPU and the EU which have paid staff. And they some of them receive government support. Certainly the Irish one does, and the Danish one does. You have also a range of facilities going across. And when we were talking at the last meeting, people were expressing surprise that there were actual hospitals which looked after polio survivors inside of Europe. There is a hospital run by a voluntary organization on the edge of Lake Garda, which is called AIDM, in a place called Malchesny. Now, that is a polio hospital. It was built for originally people who had polio and rehabilitation. It now looks after polio survivors. There is another hospital, the Katholika Institute in Koblenz, and that is a full-blown hospital underneath the directorship of Dr. Axel Reutz, and they do everything there, from rehabilitation to operations. So there are many polio survivors inside of Europe who actually require things like hip replacements. They get damaged, especially if they've been using crutches and various other orthotics. So they do all that sort of operation there. It is the only operation hospital for polio survivors in Europe. There are other hospitals, such as St. Thomas's, which is in London, which has a unit called the Lane Fox unit, which was run by Professor Nick Hart. And Brian, you'll be interested to hear this. He is actually conducting a research program on polio and COVID as well. So I will link it all up with you. He's also, although the political commentators make a joke about it, he is one of the two people who actually cared for the Prime Minister of England, Boris Johnson, when he was in hospital, but people have forgiven him for that by now. The overall area of that is that there is then an offshoot which is sitting in Birmingham Hospital, but the biggest rehab center is actually in Denmark. remarkable history. The Danish center is run by what was called PTU. It's now Polio Denmark. It is a full-blown facility for rehabilitation for polio patients, and it is paid for by the government. But it is much further than that, because the T inside of it stands for trauma. So as the polio population is shrinking inside of Denmark, the trauma population from accidents, diving, those sorts of things is growing. And at one stage, 1 in 4 people in Denmark gave a weekly contribution towards the polio hospital. It is now down to 1 in 10. There are other institutes inside of the European orbit, such as the Karolinska Institute, which is a very famous medical hospital, medical school, right the way in Sweden, in Stockholm, with Professor Christian Borg. They do a lot of research. They're doing a lot of work on polio and on post-polio. But rather like all the rest, they have been diverted by the pandemic to some extent, as has Jan Lexel, who is also a doctor who is specialized in it, in the Lund Institute in Sweden as well. The most famous one is actually Professor Franz Nollet, who's at the Amsterdam Medical Center, and they run and they do diagnostics at that center for all polios across the Netherlands and do follow-ups, but they don't have treatment facilities there. What they do is they bring people in, they diagnose them, they look at them, they do gait analysis, they look at their orthotics. I'm not sure if the same words are used right the way across the whole of the world. The orthotics being the calipers, the braces, the CAFOs, those sorts of things. And then they will refer those people back to their own hospital in their own area with their own facilities. So there are quite a few doctors around and quite a few staff who know about polio. They are in a situation as well where there are research going on. For example, in Ireland, there is a doctor who is actually a physiotherapist, and she has done a lot of work in this. And she got a doctorate, and her name's just gone straight out of my head. She got Deirdre Murray. She got her doctorate funded by Polio Ireland. So Polio Ireland actually funded at that stage her getting a doctorate to do research into looking after polio patients in Ireland. And there's about 3,500 left in Ireland, about the same in Denmark as well. So there is a wide range of things, but the European Polio Union itself is an overarching organization. And one of its main things is to bring all the polio organizations together and to network, as it did in Copenhagen, which is the last time I saw you, Brian. Then there was another one in Amsterdam, and we had representatives coming in, and they got such a reputation that we had people coming in from Australia, Mexico, Korea, Malawi, Zimbabwe, Ethiopia, and going through. So the European Polio Organization believes in networking, and it works on the basis of bringing those people together, not just the polio survivors, but the doctors as well. It encourages coordinated research into improving daily lives of polio survivors. It looks at ways of trying to set up and trying to keep a knowledge base. One of the things that we're discovering right the way across the world, especially amongst those countries where polio has been eradicated a long time ago, or certainly 20 odd years ago, is that the book of knowledge, the actual underlying, if you like to call it in other terms, tribal knowledge of polio, how to treat it and how to treat the polio survivors, is disappearing. That knowledge is still required in the developing countries, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Madagascar with this outbreak, the Philippines, various other places. They need the knowledge which is there. And the European Polio Union is trying to encourage people to come together to coordinate this knowledge, put it together, and eventually put it into the EPU's website with medical experience, survivor experience. Sometimes the two don't actually naturally gel together. There are opposite points of view. It is not only looking at the medical knowledge, it is also looking at the social knowledge, so that you've got books which are being produced. Unfortunately, most of them in languages that none of us can speak, such as Dutch, Finnish, and various others, which bring together the experiences. Yes, all right, Div. Afrikaans has got a good relationship there. The overall part of it is that the social knowledge of where people have gone is, and how they've survived and what they've done, is actually going to enhance and enrich the lives of those who are still going through the battle. And it is, as we all know, a battle going right the way down. People think they have polio, that's it, they get out of it, they come out the other side, they're walking around, they manage and everything else. And all of a sudden they find out there's this nasty little thing called post-polio that comes along and kicks them in the backside and says, no, we haven't finished with you yet. You know, one of the fascinating pieces of knowledge is that we did some research inside the European Union with medical schools and medical colleges. Inside the 7 years training for a typical doctor, the training on polio and post-polio is 7 minutes. So it is rather short. Now, the fact is that you've got to go out and you've got to do this and get it further and go out more. And that is what the EPU is actually doing. It is bringing people together to coordinate, put together, and encourage the exchange of knowledge, not just within the European Polio Union, but farther around the world. It was said to me when I was president of the EPU that the EPU punched well above its weight. It does. It has helped to form, and it actually does a coordinating job. And one of the people whose camera's not on, but is actually here, is Erika Gehrig, who's from Switzerland. And Erika keeps getting requests, as I do, coming in from people saying, where do we find this? Where do we find that? It is not just people from the European side who look for that information. It's people for example, from Argentina. I had a doctor from Argentina whose mother had developed bowel cancer. And the question came through from her, what sort of problems is she going to encounter with general anesthesia? What sort of stuff could be done? How can she be helped with anesthesia? All right. I have a doctor in my titles, but it's not a medical doctor. So what do? We get hold of the experts. In this case, a doctor who operates, Axel Roots down in Germany, who operates. We put the two of them together and we get people linked up. And that's where these polio support groups and an organization, a nascent organization such as this advocacy group, can actually do. And going further with, as Ken mentioned, another steering committee, they can actually put people together. The book of knowledge amongst the polio survivors is vast. It has vast amount of knowledge and people turning around and saying, we didn't know this, we didn't know that. Perhaps the most telling comment came from one of the leading experts in Europe, who, when we were in Copenhagen, a pile of polio survivors, the doctors decided that they would have their own meeting and they went off to a room. So a bunch of us as polio survivors decided, well, this is supposed to be an integrated conference. So we sort of crashed in on them, talked to them, and then they started asking us questions. And the chair of that part of the conference turned around and said, 5 minutes with a polio survivor, will teach you far more about how to treat PPS than sitting in a classroom for a month or two. That is what the EPU does, brings together knowledge. That is what it has to do. It's a world of knowledge that is not, we don't want to lose, but it will be lost. And it's how can we bring it all together into one place. Very difficult job. It can be done with the right amount of things and with the right amount of members. I actually think that Rotary, with what it's advocating to do at the moment in looking at polio survivors, is going to help that enormously. It's got the resources, it's got the wherewithal, it's got a lot of medical people inside it as well. And it has got the reach to get out around the world. Now, there aren't many overarching organizations, like PHI is one, EPU is another, but there aren't many overarching organizations in each country or in each group of countries. It's going to be up to people like you to feed that knowledge through into PHI, into EPU, into the Rotary organization and advocacy group, which might come out of this, and let everybody know what can be done. The one message I would give, and I've said it all the way along the line, is that unfortunately, far too many polio survivors have a tendency to look that way, over their shoulder. We've got to look forward. We've got to look forward to looking after the next generation. I sent Ken a paper, which some of you will have seen, by Antonio Toniolo, who's a virologist. We wrote it with Joan Headley, Mary Ann from Australia, myself, and we estimated that there are north of 25 million polio survivors in the world. There's not that many inside of the Europe and the Americas. We owe it to the other polio survivors who come after us to have all that knowledge in one place so they don't have the problems that we did. If you have any questions, I'm quite happy to answer, but I'd pass it back to you, Ken.
I have a question.
Go on, Marianne.
John, I'm not going to let you go. Is there another polio conference being anticipated in Europe?
There should have been one in 2018, but that fell down because of contractual problems. Unfortunately, the pandemic hit it badly because it was supposed to have been in Vitoria in northern Spain. And this is where it shows the power which went with Rotary, because Rotary Spain was going to underwrite the whole conference for us. And the reason that Rotary Spain was going to do it in Vitoria was that the president of Rotary Spain in 2020 lived in Vitoria in the Basque region, northern Spain. At the present time, there is no real plan for doing another one, but there could well be in the next couple of years. There is certainly a joint conference between GLIP, which is the French organization, and EPU in Paris in 2023, but it is not a full-blown Congress.
So, full-blown Congress, does that mean post-polio survivors would not be able to attend?
Sorry, Marianne, you're disappearing.
I said, does that mean that in 2023, whatever's going to occur in Paris, and pardon my voice, that's the COVID, that the post-polio survivors would not be able to attend?
We don't know the full details yet. We'll have to talk to Robert Cordier, who's the president of the French organization, to see whether they're going to actually open it up to much wider organization than just the European continent itself.
Well,
but I will undertake to do that, and I will get back in touch with you, Marianne, personally.
But also want you to think of me as also a Greek. I am moving to Greece. I have Greek citizenship, so I will formally fall under the envelope of European.
If you want to use your Greek passport to do it, I'm quite happy. I'm sure they'd welcome you.
Thank you so much, John.
My pleasure. Long time since Amsterdam.
Yes.
John, Dave Talbot here. Question about the hospital in Koblenz. Do you know if they take in international patients as well from the African continent?
Yes, they do, but it has to be done by arrangement directly with the director, who is Axel Roots. We can go through from there. We'll put together some notes and see if we can answer all of these questions for you as well. The other thing is that the hospital for European persons, the hospital in AIDM, which is in Malchesney on Lake Garda, also takes in international patients. Part of that is underneath an EU directive, which allows health authorities to actually transfer patients from one to the other. The other one is that the hospital in Copenhagen takes people in for 3-week rehabilitation therapy. And there is also a hostel or hotel on site as well, where you can stay because it's outside of Copenhagen. It's actually on the edge of an industrial estate. The cost, though, for 3 weeks is something in the region of €10,000. Does that answer your question?
Yes, pretty much, John. Thank you.
John, we have we have in this group Jacqueline Wilson, Dr. Jacqueline Wilson. She's actually involved in the other group I'm involved in, and she's a doctor in Egypt. Has just set up a Rotary club, e-club, what they call, and a virtual club made up of doctors. I think, Jacqueline, it's doctors in Egypt area, but also around the world. So she had posted on here that she had first time she's heard of your organization, so she wants to connect with you, John, on that.
That's fine.
And she's going to be helpful for us also in the medical profession in her area, and with her club. So thank you, Jacqueline. And the more we can network, the better. The more network connections we have, that's why collaboration is going to be important to working with a group like John's. Go ahead.
Ken, there's also a group which is in Turkey as well, which is actually getting cross-border traffic from Syria, etc., run by a lady called Dr. Arzu On. She attends a lot of the EPU functions as well and speaks at them. Very knowledgeable. Turkey is not well represented by polio specialists, but she has actually set up this one on the coast, and she's got an offshoot in Istanbul. That was another place potentially for a conference.
Oh, great. Okay, great. I mean, if you could send it along, that information, that would be great, John. And John, and networking is important, and we're not just helping groups of people, we're looking individuals, as John has done many of that in his time working on this in this area. And just recently, he helped me out with a woman from Mexico who was scared to death because she started to get symptoms of post-polio syndrome, and she wanted somebody to talk to, and she spoke Spanish. So I wrote to John, and he gave me a number of groups, including one in Mexico. And we have heard that she has joined that group in Mexico. So we're helping individuals too, which is extremely important part of this whole project. And so we want to collaborate with people like Brian's group and the Australian group, which we've connected with already, with Carol in Pennsylvania, with her group there. The more we can collaborate, the better. And once again, if we can take the role in bringing awareness and then direct them to groups that can give them support when they need support. that would be great. So any other questions for John?
Can I ask a question? This is Scott Baggett.
Hey, Scott.
First time being a part of this. I love what I hear. I guess the problem with what I hear is I'm in the US, I'm in Florida, and yet I have nobody that I can find except for down in Boca Raton, which, you know, unless you have a millionaire, you can't get nothing done, you know, to get into that area. So my question simply is, what I'm hearing is incredible. Why doesn't the United States have some of the things I'm hearing the European areas have? It just seems baffling to me, and I don't understand it.
Ken, can I dive in here?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Those people, there were a lot of people who in the US, who were in the US military, who got polio in the 50s and 60s because of Korea and Vietnam. And they're being looked after under the Veterans Administration.
Yeah.
What the US has not done, and this is from me coming to the US as well in the past and having people I've spoken to in both the Veterans Administration and various other levels of government. They have not broadened it out in the same way as it has been broadened out inside of Europe. In the same way that the WHO is now recognizing that when it did the polio eradication, GPEI program, that it is not that one of the things they privately admit these days is that they should have built in a legacy program to look after polio survivors afterwards. That is being looked at as well. And I think this group will do well to actually the Rotary will work well with WHO, and it already does, in that area. But that's where it's coming through. Polio survivors in the US who are veterans, yes, they're looked after. I'm afraid the general population seems to be sadly lacking in facilities. I keep seeing it on Facebook, on a post-polio coffee house. You know, where can I find? Where can I find? Where can I find? All the time. We can give generalized information from Europe, but we can't. When somebody says, "Where can I find in California, Florida, whatever it is," somebody, we can't help with that. If somebody says, "What can we do about this, that, or the other?" Quite often what I do is I reply to them, get in touch with Brian at PHI.
So what can I do?
And Scott,
Yes, sir.
Dick, I don't know if you can help him a bit. Dick's in Florida also, as far as somebody he can contact down there.
Yeah, I'll send him my address.
Please do.
And that's, you know, Ken and John, that's one of the things you're hitting on, is that this group here today is setting up an awareness, but also as a clearinghouse to where we can send information to Mona and Marcy and all the other, and Carol and all the other support groups who can directly help. So, you know, John, that's one of the things we're up to.
Well, the last one I had was from Tonga.
Wow.
Wow.
Haven't been there recently.
Thank you, John. And Scott, and anybody else who's in this the room today who are not in our mailing list, please add your email to the chat here, and we'll make sure you're on our mailing list. I want to move a little south here from where John is in Ireland down to South Africa. Div, who is got an initiative going there for post-polio syndrome and for polio awareness. And Div is a little different approach to this whole thing because Div is an athlete. So, and it's interesting that he being an athlete and having polio, it's a balancing act, I'm sure, there that you need to deal with. So, Div, I'm going to turn this over to you to talk about what you have going in South Africa there.
You know, John, I think probably when you stated that this is an athlete, he became one. It was a life dream which was severely dented when I was only 4 years old, and I never ran after that. And basically it took me almost a lifetime until I was 30 to re-establish myself, and I was internationally active as a scientist. I played all kinds of sport, and the same effect when I was 4 years old. One day on the squash court, I felt that there was a tap dripping in my chest and in my arms and in my legs, in my midriff. And I went back to the doctor, who was in one of the government hospitals, but a specialist neurologist, who admitted me for a week, and together with his assistant did all kinds of tests under general anesthesia and anesthesia, and I was there for a week. Ben Lotz was his name. He joined Mayo Clinic in the later years, but the devastating diagnosis was I suffer from post-polio, and if I thought that I could get up and run again when I was 4 years old, this would not happen again. And it's probably that kind of challenge which got me going again. The neurologist said to the family a couple of years after that, "It's time now, get him ready." And this is my campaign now, is to say there come a time when you may have to deal with these adversities. When people say get ready, you may not be walking again. The very first thing I decided to do was to get myself equipped to be disabled in that manner and immobile. So I hope together with Aina we can put together a program to assist people, because the very first thing that I did is I lost almost 45 kilos of weight, because if you chubby, you shouldn't be chubby in a wheelchair, and if you have to be mobile, you need arms that are strong and shoulders. So dietary requirements and discipline was almost the very first. I also learned from some of our Olympic swimmers that the headspace is the very first one that is of importance if you want to become a successful athlete. So headspace is the very first. Motivation, therefore, and I think a caring group of people that assist and that you can call on helps a lot. But after that, I basically got myself to get out of a chair and walk a couple of meters. Afterward, I walked around the house, later around the block, and I started getting into a space where I could run again. When I say run, I actually walk. My legs don't allow me to run. But we talked about it earlier. I think it is all about exploring those areas that your body allow you to still be active in. Consequential training, I think it was called, when an Olympic coach and I had a discussion. He gives you a program, and the consequences of your disability determine what of it you can follow, what of it you can use. But it's an extremely disciplined life. If you're a polio survivor, again, the headspace not only for athletics, but the headspace for being a polio survivor is probably the most challenging of all. When people, especially I am not looking from the outside, I'm disabled but not disfigured, and therefore when you are disabled but you don't look it, you are even in a greater difficulty than you would be if otherwise. So you almost always defending, and therefore it's probably sometimes easier hiding than it is going out in the open. But nevertheless, what happened is we started looking at in those areas in which I was comfortable to develop. So from the very onset, I was quite comfortable on a bike. I fell more than I rode, but I managed to stay on top of it. I swim with my arms and not my legs. It's difficult to breathe. You have to understand that when your core is paralyzed, you breathe through your stomach and not your chest. So those were the challenges to overcome. But I swam and I rode a bicycle and I could walk fast. Therefore, I started participating in triathlons. When I was in Egypt, by the way, Doctor, I probably got to the final kind of recognition of the fact that my journey meant that I had to become an advocate and to tell and to assist and to let the world know that there are disabled people that require assistance, that these people are disabled because we haven't prevented them from getting polio. It still happens. People still get it. And those that have had polio don't know that they have post-polio. That post-polio is probably, it was my worst enemy. It ended a very exciting international career almost abruptly. So what I'm going to try and do when we launch this Road to Morocco campaign is to, for one, bring an awareness of polio. But to me, it's almost senseless, really, if you don't at the same time bring an awareness of post-polio, because that's to me that was the bigger killer was the second time around. So what we hope to do is to share from next week, Tuesday, when I'm inducted into the Benoni Club as a Rotarian, we'll be launching a Road to Morocco campaign. We'll be fundraising in the normal way for End Polio Now, but I'm seeking ways to promote post-polio and the awareness of post-polio. And the fact that there's always something that you can do. I'm sure you guys are more aware of it than anybody else. If you can't walk, you can still swim. I have great difficulties. I sleep with CPAP machine because I was in the iron lung more than I cared to be when I had polio. So it's a weakness for me. I really struggle, and I get flashbacks of iron lungs when I do open water swimming and I battle to breathe. But the message I think would be for the post-polio guys, first of all, recognize that there is a comeback of polio. Almost difficult to classify it, but you still have this sequel of polio, and you need to understand and to follow up and to really develop those areas that are not affected, but take notice of those that are. You know, I think it was on this group that they mentioned that Alan Alda had Parkinson's. When I read the book that Ina presented in the very first meeting that I attended by Bruno, Dr. Bruno, he said that us polio people, if we didn't die before it happened, we would all have finally gotten Parkinson's disease. And that, when I spoke to the neurologist, he just kind of lit up and said, "But let me start treating you as if you were going to get, or if you had Parkinson's disease." And it was a moment in time. I must be honest with you; it was a real moment in time. So I think there's so much to tell, and so much to encourage people on. I find that being as active as I am, I'm an extreme sports person. I train up to three hours a day. I battle sometimes. Some other times it's easier. There are areas in which I really don't excel that much. But still, the effect and I do believe that the chemistry in one's body supports it as it does when the feel good of the challenge is something that's really exciting. So yes, we're going to be launching this campaign. We will in the second week of September, a week or so before Polio Month starts, we'll be in Morocco, and hopefully we'll be spending time with the Moroccan Rotarians, and maybe if we can, if they do attend a campaign, a Rotary campaign to immunization campaign there, and share with them about polio and post-polio, and that it's not the end of life. It could, in many ways, for me, it was the beginning. To go to Egypt, where my dad was awarded medals because he was a fighter pilot, I did the same and stuck a gold medal on my chest after I won the African PTS3 para item in the triathlon there. Thanks, Ken. That's about what I have. Questions or even suggestions. I really, what I lack at the moment is I lack a post-polio brand that I could stick on my forehead or somewhere to really, because we get a fair bit of coverage when we compete in these games.
Well, thank you, Dev. Actually, Anne had a question, and you kind of said something about Alan Alden with the Parkinson's and the polio. I don't think there's any connection with the two of them. And I don't know, but I don't think anybody's connected the two together. Is that true? I've asked that question in a general way.
Well, I could reach out and find Bruno's textbook, but in it he makes quite clear. He makes mention. Said that he makes a statement that if polio people didn't die before they got to that stage, they would all have gotten Parkinson's. Hold on. While we
Brian,
talk,
have you seen any connection there between the two, or Carol? Either one, have you seen any connection between Parkinson's and polio?
Of the 1,500 people I've seen since 1985, I only know of 2 or 3 that have Parkinson's. So I think it's probably about the same incidence as in the general population.
Ken, the European Academy of Neurology says that people with polio PPS who get Parkinson's is no higher than the general population.
Good. That's great news. I Googled it when it came up, and there was something in JAMA, which is, you know, medical publication, that says something about the polio hitting neurons that might also be involved with Parkinson's. So it's just something to follow. I'm glad to hear the positive news.
John?
Yeah, I think that's it runs in the same category as sleep disorders with polio survivors. There's a percentage of people that are polio survivors that have, like, for instance, that they've talked about is sleep apnea. And I think Parkinson's falls in the same category. And I think that's the connection that Dr. Bruno was trying to talk about. Brian, do you have any information on, that link?
Yeah, I mean, I would just agree with what Dr. Yulberg said, that there's some hypothesizing that polio survivors there may be a higher incidence. I think they've looked at it in the past, but there's nothing definitive to show that it's higher in the polio population than the regular population.
I just looked it up, and the reference is to symptom parallels of symptoms, but not a much more significant chance of us getting it.
And I'm terribly sorry if I in any way insinuated that we were getting Parkinson's. It is yes, indeed a parallel in the symptoms and in the manner in which it damages neurons, which causes shortages of certain of the neurotransmitters, and the manner in which it caused tremors and those kind of effects, and the treatment that I was referring to is to address basically the symptom and not necessarily Parkinson's itself. So the neurologist never mentioned that I had Parkinson's or similar to Parkinson's, but yes, the symptoms and some of the progression of the disease is similar, and therefore one may benefit in some of the treatment, which I did, by the way, tremendously.
And one of the things you've talked about, and which is, I'm sure everybody in this group that's going through post-polio syndrome is dealing with too. We talk about the physical challenges of it, but you're talking also about the mental challenges of it, of accepting your limitations and living with your limitations. And that's a whole nother area.
May I say that finding voices other than your own to in this mental challenge is probably the biggest single victory. If you were to have support in what you were saying and what you were confronted with, you can imagine my boss in those days of a very large multinational, German multinational not pesticide, but a pharmaceutical, a chemical company, took me for a trip to Victoria Falls to offer me his position, which was unheard of for a non-German person. And to convince him a couple of months after he offered me the job that I was heading a way in which I would probably not be able to fulfill my duties was extremely difficult. I mean, it's traumatic. And the support that people, if I had cancer, it would have been easier because I could tell him, look, I have cancer, I'm going to die, or this is the route it's going to take. But to tell a person or people I'm suffering from the effects of polio, which I had 35 years ago, and I'm physically and mentally not able to take up the challenge. If you can't see, for example, it's polio, post-polio has a tremendous effect on one's brain capacity too. In fact, there were lots of studies done, and I saw it myself. Effects on which is very similar to what you would get when you get a stroke, of lesions in certain areas in one's brain. So these all limit your capacity, and in areas where it's not noticeable, that's the most difficult. You can imagine if you struggle to breathe at night, who notices that? Nobody else. If you can't get up because it hurts so much that you would not dare to, but you need to get the encouragement to get up, and beyond the hurt, there may be movement. In fact, in my case, if I could get up and start going, I can do a 5-kilometer quick walk in the afternoon. And to get, yes, sorry, John.
Sorry to cut on. Dave, one of the things you were talking about was the mental side of it. There is several of the organizations inside of Europe, Ireland, Denmark, Sweden, part of the German organization, and in France, when somebody is diagnosed with PPS, it hits them like a brick, you know, they go down like a rock. And they actually offer to the individuals counseling, which is very akin, and the way that it's put, easiest way to explain it, the way that it's put is that they are offering them bereavement counseling. It's
Sure.
Almost like the death of something, and they've got to go on to something else, and they've got to go work through it. And they're actually doing that, and it's pulling a lot of people through, helping them to cope and to actually manage their lives and to rebuild them.
The invisible second strike, I call it. It's probably, yeah, it's a bad one. Bereavement, yes, that's about the way in which one can deal with it. I think in getting support, to understand that it's not awkward to feel the way you do. It's okay. If you are one, it's more difficult than if you were 10 or more. But I certainly hope to share as much as I can, and I hope that we'll activate not only Rotarians but people all over the world to share and to basically make known the effect of what post-polio does to one's life, and the challenges that lie, and probably the pleasures of overcoming some of it. I think that's the most exciting. To get onto a podium with shaky legs and Nordic walking poles and take a gold on the chest is an amazing feeling. I must tell you that.
Thank you, Dave. I mean, thank you. We're well excited about the fact that you're going to become a new Rotarian. That's tremendous news. Because once again, I think we Rotary all over the world can help us work on this. And you're doing that trip to Morocco campaign, and Rotary is going to help you with that. That's great. And there's I'm going to share the chats on here, but there's some good information there coming on the chats that are going on. We're past the hour, and I didn't want to go too much beyond that, but just some announcements. As I mentioned, we have a steering committee, and that steering committee is making decisions and will come in and let you know, the group as a group, of what the best direction for this group to take, to become an organized organization. And as we said, our role is looking at as Rotary at this point. We have a newsletter now, and that will be going out hopefully every couple of weeks. And please welcome and share information with me that you want to put in that newsletter. John sends a lot of good stuff to there, and we can put that in there. We have now set up a schedule of meetings, which I posted in the chat. Basically, for the next 3 months, we're scheduled every second and fourth Thursday of the month, at 10 a.m. Till end of September, and we'll see where we're at that point as far as future schedule. We have a LinkedIn group, which I'll share in the newsletter. Also, welcome everybody to join that and post articles on that LinkedIn group. Thanks to Janie from South Africa. I don't think Janie's here. She has also set up a WhatsApp group for this Post-Polio Syndrome Advocacy Group. If you're on WhatsApp, please let me know, and we're going to put you in that group. That can give more of an instant conversation going on there with that WhatsApp group. We're in the process of setting up a Facebook group, the communications, better communications there. I have created for this group an email, which I'll be sharing with everybody so that people can write directly to the email rather than to me. The newsletter, if you give me your email address, I will put you on the newsletter list. We're up to about 130 people on that email list at this point, which is still small and comparative to other groups, but it's more than double what we were last time we met. So it's rapidly growing, which tells me the need for what we're doing. So the email will be so people can write there. I also will continuously send out ways that people can just sign up for that newsletter or put on a mailing list. I've created a calendar. One of the things we've talked about is there's so many events going on around this subject that it would be good to have a calendar so that people could post on their events that are going on, and people can go in there and see what events are going on. In addition to this group, the events around the world that are going on. And then now that we have an email created, I can create a Google Drive for this group so that we can put documents in there. So if you want to refer to some documents that we're talking about, maybe somebody makes a reference to a document or a link here, we can put it in that Google Drive so that you can find it. Eventually down the road, we're talking about a speakers bureau, and I'm glad to see Ina here because we're going to be one of our speakers in that group of people that are interested in going around speaking. Particularly, we're going to focus on Rotary to start with. Please let me know on that. Right now, you can write to Kenneth Masson, MASSON @gmail.com. We want to set up a marketing group committee to figure out, because communication is going to be one of our keys. So anybody who has an interest in marketing, I'll be interested in hearing from you. Jacqueline in particular, we want to set up a medical group so that we can start reaching some medical people around the world, and you can help us with that with your club and your connections. We have also other people in Rotary. Obviously, there's lots of medical people in Rotary, not just looking at the doctors, but the therapists also, which are an important part of this whole thing. So we want to reach out to therapists and set work. So we need to set up a group, a subcommittee that's going to discuss how are we going to do that? What's the best way of doing that? We're looking at webinars in the future, creating videos, a YouTube page. Eventually, we will do a newsletter. I'm sorry, eventually we will do a web page. I'm waiting on that because we need to figure out what our structure is going to be, which that steering committee is going to work on doing that. Constance, you have a question?
No, Ken, what I would like to offer as a suggestion for us to consider, I've been involved with a couple of groups who have done compilation books wherein members of that group, whether it's dealing with suicide or mental illness or whatever the issue is, they
Excellent.
tell their stories. And with a group like this, that would be a marvelous both marketing and publication resource that could be shared out on a global scale that would give people also additional information, as well as put a face to the concept of PPS is still here and we're still here and we're not going away kind of message. And I've been working on a couple of them, and I'd be more than happy to help if you think that that would be a project
Yes.
to be worth working on.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
sign me up,
Thank
Coach.
you. Thank you. Okay. And we're, and of course, we recorded this meeting. And so I'll be sharing that on the newsletter. Norma, we're looking for, oh, I can't speak Spanish. So nice to, hello, hola, Norma. We're doing a lot of things. What we also want to do is totally respect and recognize the action group that Rotary has, the post-polio, I'm sorry, the Polio Survivors Action Group, that they're extremely important group. And we look forward to working in partnership with them and helping each other in that group. So that's another goal we'll be working on, because it's important that we all work together on this. So any other questions before we close this meeting? The next meeting is the 28th of July, by the way. That will start our schedule of every second and fourth Thursday of the month.
Ken, I was just gonna say ditto on the therapy. I think everybody here could probably agree. If there's one thing I run into all the time is being told to go to a therapist and they want to say, give me 5 of these, 10 of these. And, you know, you walk out of there and 2 weeks later, you're just recouping. So yeah, good therapists that understand our issues are the number one thing
Yes.
for me.
Yes.
Okay, very good, excellent. No, we certainly find that that's maybe more important than the medical at this point, because they're the ones that are going to help with the recovery. And John, Norma in this group is the woman that you and I have been working with. So, and Norma, I don't think you speak English. Norma, habla in English? No, maybe not.
Hi, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Angel Nina. I know Norma. She told me that she doesn't understand English that well, but I'm here and trying to help her out. I'm also a polio survivor. She's from Mexico, and I'm from Colombia. And I was asking if there's any extensive research or anything, any clinics like what's been done in Europe, anything in South America for those of us who are Spanish speakers or native from these countries, Spanish-speaking countries.
And actually, I'd like to connect with you. I'm in Colombia, Medellin. So maybe we can work on that through the Rotaries in Colombia and South America, because I've been focusing on that and trying to do something more with that to get them involved. So let's you and I connect. We've got Norma, I think, in the Mexican group, so she at least has somebody who can speak. She can speak her language with.
She lives in Texas. I live in Massachusetts. I was born in Colombia, and that's where I got polio. She and I connected through Facebook. But I know one of the barriers for her joining these groups is the language. I know that her family tries to help her out. And I actually read the polio paradox and kind of gave her some of my notes. But I think the type of polio that we have is also different. Like I have it, she had it very mildly. And she's also 10 years older than me. So there's a lot of differences that, you know, what applies to me may not apply to her. And I'm just learning this stuff too.
Well, let's work on that. It's funny because you're Columbia and moved to Massachusetts, from Massachusetts and moved to Columbia. So we've got something in common there. So, okay, John?
They just answered the question about research in Spanish. There's been a lot of work done in Madrid, a lot of work done in Barcelona, not published in Catalan, but published in Spanish. And there's also been some work done inside of the university in Rosario in Argentina. If I can dig out the references, I'll send them through.
Okay, and so what about South America? Anybody know anything about work being done in South America?
There's a group in Argentina. There's and one in Chile.
Yeah, there's some good resources in Brazil.
Portuguese.
Yeah, I'm not aware of, we don't, at least in our directory, we don't have a lot of listings or any, I think, in like Colombia, up in that area.
Okay.
The only thing I know about Colombia is there's a very experienced therapist there called Marley Torres. She used to treat me in England, and she's actually in Bogota.
This is Angie, and real quick, I don't know if John or someone knows John Hopkins. Have they done a lot? And the reason I bring them up is they're they're the medical provider in Panama. So maybe there's something in Panama.
Not that I know of.
Okay, it would be if it's John Hopkins related.
Okay. And can you send me the connection on that? And John, that doctor that you work with in Bogota, can you send me the connection on that?
It's a lady.
Oh, lady. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Very cool.
Can I suggest also, if I may, a website link? I put it in the chat, but it's academia.edu. And it is a marvelous resource on medical research, scientific articles. Your doctor will make very good sense of it, even if you're not comfortable with everything that's in it, of international research that's being done. And if you do a search engine search for post-polio syndrome, you'll find tons of articles that I've shared with my doctor, my physical therapist, you name it, I've been there, my orthopedist, it doesn't matter, pain management, it branches out and it's international. So from some of those sources you're looking for all over the world, you will find scientists and researchers who are at least publishing information if we do the search for post-polio syndrome specifically. It's an excellent resource.
There's also the European Federation of Neurological Sciences with their library. There's also the European Academia of Neurology. I'll try and dig out all the references for you, Ken, and send them through.